Alright, I'm definitely going to get this time. This is like the 16th time I've tried to do this. Hey everybody, Mr. Newsom. You're about to study economic systems, or you're currently doing them right now as you watch this video, and it's complicated. Even though there's only three, and even though you've heard all three referred to before, I thought it might be beneficial for me to do some sort of face-to-face, even though this is not really face-to-face, explanation of what they are. I've made myself a checklist. So it should look something like what your graphic organizer looks like, that you will have to fill out, so that I can just hit these really simply and we can have a basic understanding. Once again, this will be a very basic understanding of all three of these economic systems, and really just an understanding of them in the mid to late 1800s, not an overarching explanation of how they apply today. But let's get started. There's three economic systems. You're going to do capitalism, socialism, communism. Now, you've probably heard all three of these at some point. You probably have some idea at least about what some of them mean. Not really sure if it's accurate or not, but let's go ahead and talk about each three. The first one will be capitalism. We'll start with the definition. The definition of capitalism, as simply as I can put it, is an economic system based on Enlightenment principles about the natural systems that run everything, including the economy. Capitalism will respond not to government regulation, but ideally to just the what is called invisible hand of capitalism, which is a very fancy way to say supply and demand. That is the only thing that is needed in the mind of a capitalist to regulate the economy, is the supply and the demand. As supply goes up, price goes down, demand might go down. But as demand goes up, supply will go down, and then the price will increase to meet some sort of regulatory status, which is a simple way to say that the only thing that should regulate the economy is supply and demand. Now, the motive here for capitalism is very simple. It is personal profit. The owner of a business is working to enrich themselves specifically, not their workers, not some grander sense of purpose. It is simply just, quite simply, to make money for the individual. The supporters of capitalism will be business owners, like factory owners, landlords, shop owners, the bourgeoisie class, the emerging middle class of the Enlightenment has now come to dominate industry in the Industrial Revolution, which is something you've already learned about. And they really like this capitalist model. One reason they really like it is because of government involvement. You can see here that government involvement is next on the checklist. It is zero, ideally. It is zero. And a capitalist might say, well, that is because the government can only interfere with the natural workings of the economy by trying to regulate it. And that is what they believe, but also there's a quite more simple way to understand this. The main reason that business owners don't want the government involved is because the government brings with it regulation, like labor laws, like environmental protections, like codes and standards of safety in their factories. And all these things, whether it is labor laws that force some sort of minimum wage or limit the amount of hours that a laborer can work, or it is environmental protections that regulate how waste must be disposed of, or whether it is safety, in which new equipment must be built around existing equipment to make it safe for the workers. All these things will limit the ability of the business owner to make money. It's a very cold calculation, especially in the Industrial Revolution, but if you have to pay your workers a living wage, then it's less money in the pocket of the business owner. And is private property involved? Yes. Private property is completely supported by the business owner. But let's make a very simple distinction right now. In fact, I'm going to write it down. And it is simply that private property, and you should write this down too, is not personal property. In modern society, look, I wrote it really sloppily. In modern society, we think of anything that we own as private property, and that's not accurate. Private property, while it is something you own, is not the same as personal property. So, for example, my glasses that I took off so I couldn't see how stupid I looked on camera, these are personal property. I own these, they're just for me. I don't really have any other justification for them other than they are mine. That is personal property. Now, if I owned a factory making eyeglasses, that is private property. Private property, simplest definition is probably just any property that is owned by an individual and uses the labor of others to make a profit. So if I have an eyeglasses factory, continue this example, I've got an eyeglasses factory, and I pay my workers, I don't know, $7 an hour, which would be really good for back then. It would be insanely good for back then. But then I sell the glasses for more than it costs to make them, and I keep the excess profit for just myself as the factory owner. It is now no longer personal property, but it is private property. If you have any questions about that, remind, email, you'll find a way to get in touch with me and ask me. The next one we want to talk about is socialism. Socialism, broadly speaking, is probably the most difficult one to grasp because there's not a super solid definition for what socialism means. It changes as the years go on, and in different centuries it means different things. But for our sake, we're just going to say that socialism is a governmental and economic system in which the government controls major industries essential for the public welfare and regulates them not according to profit but according to need. That would probably be the easiest definition. The motive for socialism is going to be general access to basic necessities for all of the population. Supporters will be reformers. We talked about Jacob Riis, who wrote How the Other Half Lives, about the plight of the working class, especially in New York City. Any reformer or working class individual would probably at this time like socialism because it provides them access to basic necessities like sanitation, like healthcare, like fire department, those sorts of things. It would use tax money to fund public welfare programs. And of course, this is not all that socialism is, but for the sake of your understanding, just think that the government using tax money to fund public options for access to basic necessities is socialism. Private property is available in this system. This does not abolish private property. There are still business owners. There are still factory owners. They just pay a higher tax rate, and that higher tax rate provides for the general welfare of their workers. And also major industries, once again, like the healthcare system, to use a modern example, with Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All program, in which the government would provide health care for everyone using the tax dollar. That is an example of a socialist program. Public school system, example of a socialist style program. Tax money goes into a public system in which the general public benefits in the long term, in this case from an education, if we're talking about public school systems. Finally, let's talk about probably the most sensationalized of the three, communism. Excuse me. I should stop because I've coughed a few times, but honestly, this is the 15th take, so we're just going to keep rolling. Because I don't want to do this again. I probably won't get a take as good as this again. But let's do the final one, communism. Communism, simply put, which it's very complex to understand, especially when you don't have any background in it. Communism is an economic system in which there is complete equality. I guess you could almost say communism is a classless, moneyless system in which the workers control all means of production for the good of everyone in a direct democracy. Now, this might not sound like what you think of when you think of communism, and there's a lot of very Cold War, 1960s public education reasons for that. But that is essentially what communism is. It is the workers owning the means of production, which means of production are the factories, and producing for the benefit of all. The motive here is complete equality and social welfare. Your famous thinker of communism, Karl Marx, and to, a lesser extent, Frederick Engels, or Engels, whatever. Both looked around at the excess produced by the Industrial Revolution, and they look and say, in a society that for the first time ever we can produce more than we need, that there is a surplus of any basic necessity. Why do some people still not have basic necessities? And that, in a nutshell, is where communism comes from. This idea that in an industrialized society, there's enough for everyone. So rather than producing things for personal profit like in the capitalist system, the communist seeks to produce enough where everybody has what they need. In fact, money would not even be a thing in a communist society because there's no need for it. If you produce everything that everybody needs in an excess, there's no reason to force someone to buy it. I hope I didn't lose you on that. It is a little confusing. The supporters of this will be the working class. Now, in communist terminology, and this is a great term for AP test takers, these working class is going to be called the proletariat. Karl Marx divides society into the haves and the have-nots. Proletariat and then the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie would be the capitalists, which we've already talked about. The proletariat would be the communists, the workers that are going to seize the means of production in a revolution against the bourgeoisie factory owners at some point. Karl Marx calls this the march of history. But we're not going to talk about the ideology behind it. Let's just talk about what it is to finish up this video. Government involvement, this is a tricky one. For the sake of your understanding, government involvement is total, but at the same time, government involvement is next to none, because in a truly communist society, a government, in the sense that we think of a government, does not exist. It is a quote-unquote dictatorship of the proletariat, which sounds, once again, really sensationalized. It's basically this idea that everybody casts one vote per one person for what they think is best. But that still is a form of government. That still is a form of social contract. So for the sake of your understanding, once again, government involvement is complete and total. It just doesn't look like a government that you or I might recognize in this modern liberalist time period. Private property, there is none. All property that can be used to produce goods, whether it be clothing, food, building material, is owned by the public for the good of the public. Personal property still exists. Communists won't kick in my door and take my eyeglasses. However, if I'm an eyeglasses factory owner and I am producing eyeglasses and not giving them to people that need eyeglasses because they don't have the money to buy eyeglasses, a communist would view that as private property. They would seize it and distribute the eyeglasses amongst the workers. I hope this helps a little bit. I know these are still very complex systems, and also the meaning of them is very fluid. But between this, the PowerPoint, the textbook, and then honestly, if you want to watch the crash course videos on these subjects, between all four of these resources and more, I hope this provides some sort of explanation or light into a basic, once again, basic understanding of these economic systems. I intend to do more videos like this, hopefully with whiteboard or maybe screen share, but my internet is currently out at my house, which is just perfect timing. So this is all I can do for this right now, but hopefully this helps. I will see y'all next time.